Hello and welcome to the We All Follow podcast. My name is Matt Fox. I'm your host today. Ben's back, baby. Ben, how you doing, buddy?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Glad to be here on what is some might say a funeral like day for us Arsenal fans. But we're here. The pod is still going. We haven't given up. Follow us on X at We All Follow Pod. Ben, jump right in. What was your moment of the week?
Gosh, it's been a depressing week. um, Try and think of a non-Arsenal related thing. Probably, you know what, Palace actually. Palace being back because they started the season really slowly. I think they had some players that weren't properly fit. They looked really good, and Wharton as well. His first game back and looked like the player that we were saying let's go sign, and everyone's forgotten about him a bit, and he just kind of slapped everyone in the face just before the transfer window and the end of the season, just to remind everyone. But yeah, Nketiah getting his goal, all of the Palace players like celebrating with him, Mateta scoring again. They're just such. For me, they've always been the other team that I've liked in the Premier League. I think culturally and kind of the way that they play. If you're an Arsenal fan, you like Palace. Like over the years when they had Zaha and Balassi and stuff. So yeah, I like seeing them play well and that they're pulling away from the bottom now. But yeah, I'd say that. Or you're muted.
A big win, both in numbers and in terms of moving them up the table. Palace now on 36 points into 12th. They were in the relegation battle for a lot of the season. So it's definitely to see them. They got the new manager and they kind of hit the ground running last season. This season they struggled to get firing, but it seems like they've certainly turned the corner there. Um, yeah, you could see how much it meant to. I think it's interesting. You're talking about the Nketiah goal specifically, and he got his move right. What is it, like a approximately 30 million pound move over to Crystal Palace, and he hasn't really played much, to be honest. But it's always what's the word I'm looking for? Like, you can see how much it means to the player who scores it by his teammates' reactions, right? And like the way that his teammates were celebrating the goal for him, even though he wasn't really celebrating it, you could tell how much it meant to them, and really how much it means to them as a group, right? And like you have these people who they're your coworkers, right? And they show up every day and they work really hard, and maybe it's not the ball isn't bouncing the right way for them, or maybe they're not quite as good as the player in front of them, but they're there and they're adding to the energy around the place, right? And they're helping everybody get better. If you remember back to the Arsenal All or Nothing a few years back, there's that like now infamous scene with Eddie and Sambi Lakonga where he's like, "You think you're the only one that's not playing? You think you're the only one that's sad because you're not playing? Like, shape up." And it's moments like this where they do have the reward of their labor, and you can see how much it means to them and to their teammates ultimately, where you get to see like behind the curtain of what it means to be a footballer at this level, and one who's maybe not starting every game, right? And I think those are the moments for me, is like watching as a neutral and seeing what these guys are going through that we don't see, right? Because they're humans and they have families and they have lives outside of football. Um, and so those are the moments for me that are pretty neat to see. I mean, Chris, Aston Villa. It's interesting. I was looking at like what is my moment of the week going to be. Like Aston Villa beat Chelsea this past weekend, and then they came out here and got drubbed by Crystal Palace. There was like a lot of interesting results. That Clivert goal, that was pretty dirty. The one that he scored from outside the box, in the Brighton 2, Bournemouth 1. It was nice to see Danny Welbeck back on the score sheet on in that match. So I think that's my moment of the week. That match in general, and then the Danny Welbeck goal to give him the win. Uh, honorable mention was the Szobozlai dribbler that like could not have gone into the net any slower if it tried in their match yesterday against Newcastle. It's one of those ones like everybody's like watching it go in slow motion, and you're like, "There's no way that's gonna go in." And then it was
Yeah,
like the keeper did like the peak Aaron Ramsdale, where you like flail down to your side, but you still don't get the ball somehow.
by
The
delayed.
yeah, the delayed fall, like that's the Rambo
Oh,
special in my mind. Um, he used to give up so many goals like that. You're like, dude, I don't. God bless him. um, they are speaking of Aaron Ramsdale, Southampton in the absolute trenches, 4-0 against Brighton this weekend, and then 4-0 against Chelsea yesterday. But let's move into a new feature that I've brought on for this weekend, and we'll see what the people think about it, Ben. But I
nice.
wanted to run something by you because I'm a bit of a stats guy, right? It's something that I think is fun, and Ben, I think that West Ham United have made a massive mistake. In 2013, they signed a 99-year lease at the London Stadium.
Yeah,
And Ben, they're locked in. It's a big facility. There's the big track and everything. There's a lot of space between the fans and the pitch. In the last 2 years, they have won 11 home matches at the London Stadium, giving them of 32 matches that they've played there, giving them a 34% win rate. They've won 2 matches out of 2 the last 2 years at the Emirates Stadium. So I think that they should have signed their lease for the Emirates, and maybe they'd have better results after their 1-0 win against Arsenal at Arsenal this season. Jarrod Bowen has 5 goals and 1 assist in 11 appearances against Arsenal since the 2021 season. So Jarrod Bowen, friend of the show, and that's what I have today for Matt's Stats Corner.
wow. That's a bit of a depressing start. Again, another one for Arsenal.
It's
It's all bad at the moment. But
it's
yeah,
it's
well,
not great. It's certainly
they've
not
had
great.
very mixed reviews with the stadium thing because of the like you said with the track.
Yeah,
I went when there was the for the athletics. I used to do athletics and was a big that was
Ben's a
my
big
main
athletics guy.
sport. Yeah, that was my main sport for a long time. And when I didn't go when it was the Olympics, but after because they would have the Diamond League there every year,
Yeah,
and the atmosphere then is great. I saw Bolt there a few times just before he retired, but that it's completely different for football. Like
well, all the
it's too
action is
far
going
away.
on the outside, right? Like
Exactly. Yeah.
for
Exactly.
athletics, it's
You're watching that
perfect.
right there. It's perfect. Um, but and also with English football, I went to when I went to see Napoli, they've got the same thing. They've got the track around, and you're further away, but there's more of an atmosphere in the stands. So it doesn't, although you're further away from the actual pitch, it's still got a bit more of a better atmosphere to it. But yeah, it's I'm not sure because the Upton part was the opposite. You're like right there, like they're
Yeah,
literally as the players running by, their hairs whipping them in the face or
right.
whatever.
Which I don't know if you've seen the images of the now completed new Everton Stadium. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but the new one that's there on the water, and
Yeah,
it's honestly, in my opinion, like we've talked about on here in terms of like the tight pitches, and it's some of that is like, yes, older stadiums that have smaller pitches, but the other part of that is regulation pitches, but just where the fans are so close to the out of bounds line, right? And Everton has done something really smart, in my opinion, in their new stadium to where the pitch is the standard size, right? I think it's 105 by 68, but the distance between the sideline and the fans is really close, right? So it's like a modern stadium with all the modern amenities. They have a really sick views. Like there's not a bad seat in the house, but you still get that like small stadium atmosphere, even though it has a much larger capacity. So it'll be interesting to see. Like obviously there's different pluses and minuses, right? Like if you look at Spurs Stadium, they have a bigger pitch and a bigger area because that allows them to hold different events that you might not be able to hold in a smaller physical space on the grass, right? But you know, obviously as teams are building and teams are trying to update their stadiums, I think we're going to see the kind of the next era of stadium development here in the next few years, right? Like you had the last kind of round that was in the early 2000s, mid to like early 2000s with the Emirates, and you know, some clubs still haven't been able to upgrade their stadiums, like Chelsea, for example, who have been after a new stadium for quite some time, but can't seem to figure it out, and that's all politics and logistics and stuff like that. But I think that's the Everton Stadium specifically is a good model to kind of bring back and revive that old school feel, but in the new school way with the modern amenities and the modern stadium, and for the match going fan, right, a better match day experience ultimately. So throw your moment of the week in the comments, and let's move on to the table. So now we have the table, which has kind of settled down. As of right now, we have Liverpool in first by quite a margin on 67 points after their last two wins. Arsenal 13 points back, albeit with a game in hand and technically one to play against Liverpool directly, but they sit on 54 points. And then as we've discussed recently, there's kind of bunched up right behind them. So you have Forest, Man City, and Chelsea rounding out what's likely to be a top 5 race for Champions League. Newcastle, Bournemouth, and Brighton right behind them. Brighton on 43 points. Then right underneath them is Fulham and Villa. Villa losing, like we said, a big game this past weekend, dropping them down into 10th. Brentford, followed by Crystal Palace. Spurs and Man United are flip-flopping between 12th, 13th, and 14th, currently finding themselves in 13th and 14th, both on 33 points. Everton continuing to collect points, up into 15th on 32. West Ham, who are currently playing against Leicester, up 2-0 at home. And then you have Wolves right above the drop zone on 22 points. Leicester, who remain on 18, Ipswich on 17, and Southampton on 9. Surely to be relegated. The only question is, will they get more points than the infamous Derby County team? So then I think we can all admit at this point, right, that the title chase is done and dusted. I mean, this would be the collapse of all collapses, right, if Liverpool were to not win with 10 games to play and a 13-point lead. How do you think?
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think I still felt like it was possible to reduce the gap. I wasn't sure if we would be able to overtake them. But let's say, for example, these last two games, we'd won those. The gap would be, then you win your game in hand. I think it'd be 8 points.
No, because they're 13 right now. If we would have 5 more points, so it'd be 8. And then if we won our game in hand, it would be 5. And then you still play them.
And then you've got to play Liverpool. So then you play them, and then that's down to 2.
Yeah.
And then it's just one game that they need to drop points. So it was so possible before. But now you've lost against West Ham, drawn against Forest. Like you just can't do that in a title race. Last season, we didn't do that. And obviously, the circumstances are completely different. We got so many players injured. Even like Lewis Skelly obviously got red the previous game, so he couldn't play. So it was such a poor performance all around. I think a lot of the players look tired. I feel like when players are quite not just physically tired but mentally tired, um, you notice sometimes they can look a bit lost for ideas. They lack the creativity because every little action takes more effort, because you're just that much more tired. And you ever play a game or do something like the amount of running that these guys are doing. Like I was saying to someone yesterday, like, can you imagine take like 10 shots? You go and play football, take 10 shots, see how many you can score, and then you go run a 10K and then take 10 shots, you're probably not going to hit the ball the same. And that's what is happening with a lot of these players. They're literally running above 10K every single game. And then having to, when they get a chance that falls to them and they have to shoot quickly, and then we're complaining when they're not executing it well. I'm not giving them any excuses. I'm just saying, you think of all that, like, it's hard to maintain that if you don't have the squad depth, and we really didn't. And I think Liverpool's difference is they conserve energy quite well. And if you look at their team, they've not massively rotated. They've not had huge injury problems either. So Salah's started pretty much every game. I don't know. Has he been on the bench in any Premier League games? I can't think of it. And these type of guys, if you went to Liverpool and said Salah, Jota, Diaz, all out for at least like 4 months, and then I don't know, Gravenberch out for 2 months, and they stayed first, fair enough. But that's the difference of the two teams. We've had all of that, and then there's also been issues like when everyone's fit, even there's been issues with us scoring goals at times. But yeah, it is what it is. But like I said, the last two games, that's a nail in the coffin for me. And I don't think you can, like, we'll be fine in terms of finishing second place. I don't think we'll fall off or anything like that. But it's quite disappointing how early we've got to this point, because we've got so many games left, and it's just gonna, if you drop points in the next 2 or 3, it's completely over, and then you've just got a load of pointless games in the Premier League. Still have the Champions League to go as well, so hopefully they'll put more into that at least. But let's see.
Yeah, I mean, when you look back at the winners over the last several seasons, right? Like the year that Liverpool last won the league, all of their players were fit. They played 38, 37, 30. I've looked at it plenty of times. Like, in order to win the league, if you're not Man City, all of your best players need to stay fit the whole time. And maybe they can miss a game or miss a couple minutes here or there, but like if you like, that's the key, right? And I think that's the thing that, I don't know if it hurts the most, but that's like one of the most frustrating parts is like Arsenal had all of their players fit last year and they lost by 2 points, but those are the margins, right? Like you have those early season games for Arsenal last season where they weren't quite at the level and they drop points, and then there's just not enough points to make it up. And when you look at like the Liverpool squad, like yes, they've had Allison missed 8 games, right? But they have a backup goalie that's really good, right? They've missed
Yeah.
who is it? Kanate's missed a handful of games, but they have like he's not always been first choice there, right? Like Van Dijk has been the one who's the ever present, right? But they have had kind of it's not always been his job, especially under Klopp, right? He's been rotated in and out. But when you look at the spine of their team, Van Dijk, Salah, and Gravenberch have all played 28 matches, right? Then you keep going. McAllister, Trent, Robertson, Szobozlai. They've played 26 and 27 matches of the 28, right? So Diaz, who's obviously not a starter, he's a rotation player, but he's played 27 matches, right? So like effectively your 12th man has also been available for every match. And like it's nothing against them, like that's what you need to win a championship in this era, right? And you have to have the luck go your way. You have to have really good players playing at an extremely high level, and you have to have things work together to make it to that point, right? Um, Mo Salah has 25 goals and 17 assists, and there's 10 games left to play. Left to play. Like that's preposterous.
So,
These are like the numbers that when we were looking at when Messi and Ronaldo were putting them up every year, right? And you're like, are these numbers attainable by mere mortals? And the answer is yes, but like it, Mohamed Salah hasn't had a season like that before. Like he's had really good seasons, don't get me wrong, but he's
oh,
not had a 25.
he's like 2 games off beating Henry's record. Like
Yeah.
if he gets 2 assists in one and one in the other, like he's beating Henry's assist record. Also
Yeah.
getting more goals. Like
And
it's
there's 10
crazy.
games to play. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they're like fully deserved champions, and it's been on the back of a historic, possibly best ever season by Mohamed Salah. And what can you do about that, right? But as we look down the table, right, that's kind of the top of the table. It's going to be really interesting, you know, with the amount of games, and obviously I think there will be ups, swings, and roundabouts, as you lot would say. But let's look at kind of. I want to kind of look at 7, 8, 9, 10, or maybe 6, 7, 8 right now. Like, who do you think is gonna make Champions League based on where we sit today? Right, we've had a lot of the season to look at. You know, you have a team like Aston Villa, for example, who is in the Champions League, who's going to be playing some big matches coming up here in the next couple of weeks, right? Let me, like, for example, so Aston Villa is going to be taking on Club Bruges, right? The Club Bruges, who had a really good performance in the week before, not
Yeah.
certainly not a team that you can look at and say um, it's an easy match, right?
Yeah.
They've been struggling. They've been really inconsistent. Let's say I wouldn't say struggling for form might be a little too off putting, but they've been inconsistent in the league over the last few weeks, right? So when we go back to the table, like how much do you think that uh Champions League is going to play in for Man City are not in the Champions League, Forest are not in the Champions League, right? Newcastle are not in the Champions League, Bournemouth, Brighton, and Fulham are not in the Champions League. And even if you say they're only going to play this round, you know that they're going to throw everything at this round. And I think
Yeah.
genuinely they have a really good chance of making it through. But how do you see that impacting the race for Champions League for this next season?
Yeah, it could be big because I saw a stat, and I remember West Ham had the same thing. In fact, it was the year when they won the Conference League. So, you know, when after the game after on the weekend of playing in Europe, they didn't win. They never won throughout the whole season. And Villa have got that at the moment where every single time they've not won yet. So I believe so, anyways. If it's wrong, then it wasn't me that
I
said it
think
in the
they
first
have
place.
like I think that they have
They
like
rarely do, at least.
it's like mostly draws, draws and losses. They
Yeah,
might have
yeah,
one win, but their performances have been diabolical in games after Champions League.
yeah. And this is the thing because the quality of the teams that you play in each round is that high that you have to play a strong team. And if you don't, then yeah, and obviously the same in the Premier League as well. If you rest people in the Premier League and you come up against, I mean, you can see it with the league this year. The bottom half includes Tottenham and Man United, you know, and West Ham, who one of them, a team that spent the most like in the summer. Brentford, very solid team. They've always been good against big teams, and then the guys in the top half who they're there for a reason. All of those teams like your Bournemouth, Brighton, Fulham. So yeah, it's a really tricky one because I think I can see Bruges beating them, but at the same time, I don't know if they're just so good on the counter, Bruges, and I've not seen Atalanta beaten like that this year. So it's hard to say because Villa will play a similar way. They'll want the ball, against them. And that kind of plays into Bruges' strengths. But if they get through and then they potentially play, or one of PSG or Liverpool is the other side.
PSG or
If it was
Liverpool is on
Liverpool,
there. Yeah.
yeah, and if it was Liverpool, they'd fancy themselves against Liverpool because it's English team. You've got the history there, and I mean that would be huge for them if they could somehow find themselves in a semi-final or get to a final. And yeah, and obviously with Emery, there's stories everywhere. If they go against PSG, then it's Emery against PSG. You know, like and him being in Europe again, he's obviously had a good record previously in Europa League. So I think they'll focus on that a lot, and I think they should. Like, you know, so what if they fall out the Champions League? They're not going to qualify for the Champions League now. They fell out the Champions League, but they went on a historical run and went to the semi-final, went to the final, won it. Whatever happened, like their fans are going to remember that for the rest of it. It's like the whole thing with Leicester. Do you take if you were a Leicester fan and someone said to you, you're going to win the league, you're going to win the FA Cup, then you're going to get relegated and you're going to struggle, you're going to bounce up and down. Would you take it? Of course you would. You get a historical league win and an FA Cup. Like, this is talking about, I had a mate at school who's a Leicester fan, and when I was at school, they were in League One. He was going to every league game in League One. So, you know, it's not that long ago that was the case, but same with Villa. They won the Championship not long ago. So they're the one you would worry about. But it's really interesting.
I mean, I think the thing is for Villa, sorry, just to cut you off real quick. Like for Villa specifically, they have a money issue, right? And when you look at the books, right, and you look at stuff like the Deloitte money table, and you know, obviously, like people have different opinions on the rules and like how much teams should be able to lose and how it's unfair, but like the reality is we have rules that are being abided by. Like we can all have a different conversation on another podcast about how fair those rules are. But that being said, like Liverpool have a money issue. They have a squad cost to income issue, right? Their squad is very expensive and they're not bringing the turnover in to make that be appropriate specifically for the UEFA competitions, right? One of the ways out of that is selling players, right? So they've sold the young man, I'm drawing a blank on his name, to Saudi this past window, right? Ollie Watkins has obviously been, they sold Duran. Ollie Watkins has obviously been in the shop window as they put him up for sale without his knowledge. But they have an issue, and that's why they're loaning players. They're trying to figure out how to bring players in and make Champions League without spending money, right? And that's where the Rashfords and the Asensios come in, etc. So I hear you in terms of like the sporting side of things and wanting to have a big cup run, but at the same time, like they have to push for the league. And I think that was part of bringing these players so that they had extra bodies who were serviceable so that they wouldn't totally bin off the league and could get some level of rotation going, right? But when you look at their fixtures coming up, they play Cardiff this weekend in the FA Cup. Should be routine. They go away to Bruges, right, next midweek. Then they go to Brentford, right, which is notoriously a tough place to play. Then they have the return leg at home against Bruges, and then they go down to the South Coast and play Brighton the following weekend, right? And then let's say that they make it through, which I think is probable or likely, right? It's going to be tough, but I think they have the skills, the abilities, and the players and the manager to get through to the next round, right? You're talking about they're playing PSG or Liverpool, right? Either is going to be a massive match. And that's going to be sandwiched in between. They host Forest, then they would play one of those games, right? I think they would be home first, right? So it would be Forest, PSG or Liverpool, and then Southampton, PSG or Liverpool, and then Newcastle. Then that's when they go into their Newcastle, Man City, Fulham, Bournemouth, Spurs to end out the season, right? So like it's not getting any easier for them, right? Obviously there's some winnable games, but there's some really tough ones as well. when you have the exhaustion of the other competition, you have the big emotional output that those knockout ties are going to be no matter what happens. But they can't afford to bin off the league financially, right? But let's say that you're right and that Aston Villa don't make Champions League. So do you think that the top 5 is going to stay the way it is, or what team do you think, or teams do you think are going to make it into that top 5?
I think Forest will drop down one. I think City will overtake them. I think City are building a bit of momentum. I know they've had a couple of losses within there, but Liverpool played us a bit back as well when they still hadn't signed Nico Gonzalez, who I think has made quite a difference in the midfield. They're playing a new style, so it's taken a while to transition, but I just feel like it's going to start to click towards the end of this season. With them being out of the Champions League, obviously not in the other cup, so they've got just a league to focus on, really. So yeah, I can see them overtaking Forest there, but Forest still hanging on and getting fourth. The next part is tricky for me because Chelsea have not been very convincing recently, and obviously they beat Southampton, but like who doesn't right now? And Southampton, they were terrible.
I would hate to play Southampton
teams below,
if I was Arsenal.
Yeah, I'd hate anyone right now, honestly. I'm not confident in any game. Literally, it had to drag me to that Forest game, honestly. I was walking there thinking, no, it's not going to go good. Right, no, so I don't know. I think Bournemouth is an interesting one because they've had so many players injured for a long time. And for that reason, I don't think they're going to drop. I think they're going to qualify for Europe. It just depends whether they'll sneak into the Champions League, which I don't see happening. That would be amazing, though. Can you imagine if Bournemouth got in this Champions League and Chelsea dropped down? Is Jackson out for the season? Nico Jackson?
I'm not sure. I'll look it up.
Season ending one? Sorry, say again. I think it froze.
Oh, I said I was going to look it up.
Oh, okay.
Hamstring.
Yeah, if that's the case.
Can't sell until after the international break.
Oh, okay. I'm going to say Newcastle can do it. Yeah. The thing is, their form is so weird. They look unbeatable at home. And when they go away, they're just like a completely different team. That's the only reason they're quite hard to call, Newcastle. But they've also got a couple of big ones. But no, I'll go Newcastle to finish fifth.
Ultimately, I think when you look at Newcastle, right, they have the quality in their forward line to get it done, right? It's like, can you keep Alexander Isak fit long enough to make that happen, right? And they've rested him. Was it the last 2 matches? Oh no, he played
just
on
one,
he skipped this midweek, and then they play the FA Cup this weekend. He may or may not make an appearance. So, obviously it seems like they're making sure that he's fit with an eye on the League Cup final on the 16th of March, which would be, I believe, their first trophy in like 70 some odd years. And I think if they're able to win it, which I think they have a very good chance of winning it with their players fit, then I think that could definitely kick on their season to have them finish in the top 5. I think it's the battle of the fit attackers, right? Like, is Chelsea going to have the players that it needs to get the goals that it needs consistently to get over the line, or is it going to be Newcastle? I think Bournemouth, like you said, will stick around. They have quality that goal from Kluivert, that was like a beautiful goal. They have really talented players. And it's one of those stories like there's always that team that kind of unexpectedly makes Europe that the next year you're like, man, it's going to be sick to see this team playing in Europe. And even if it only lasts for a season, It'll give all of their fans something to remember. But at the end of the day, Iraola is a really, really good coach, and anything can happen as we move on to the next season. Let's pop into the FA Cup 5th round. So we have some. I mean, there's none of the fixtures are like, oh my god, this is gonna be so amazing, barn burner. But let's do a Ben players to watch. So do you want to hit me with a few players to watch for this weekend's FA Cup action?
Yeah, off the top of my head, let me have a think. I think of some from the smaller teams. Millwall. Millwall have got two I've spoken about recently. Someone called Reece Bangora Williams, plays as a winger / attacking midfielder. He's got a bit of a build, there's parts of him that remind me of Joe Willock when he first burst through, but he's more of a winger, like really long legs, but really quick feet, scores a lot of goals from midfield. And he's come into the first team. He's been really impressive. So Millwall's, I want to say under 21s last season there's like the Premier League 2, and there's the one that's almost like below that. They won that last year. And he was one of the star players of that. And he's come into the first team and has looked top quality. He's one of the championship players to look out for if he leaves in the summer or in the near future, because I think he's a Premier League, top of the Premier League level player. And then also they've got a striker called Mihailo Ivanovic. Mihailo Ivanovic, 20. I think he's 21, and Bangora Williams is 20. He's really interesting because he's like 6'3", but he moves really quickly for his height, and he's one of those strikers, a bit like, not exactly like Duran, but when they've got a striker where they'll just shoot from anywhere. And his goal catalogue, he's not scored many goals, but all of them have been bangers. Apart from one, which was the ball was going in, and he went on the floor and flicked it with his head like that. They literally lied on the floor and did that to score, which kind of went viral. So people might have seen that one. But yeah, so those two there. Then anywhere else, I would say at Burnley, someone I really like at Burnley at the moment, Bashir Humphreys on loan from Chelsea. He's a centre back.
Burnley, who haven't lost,
both-footed.
Haven't lost since the 3rd of November, yeah. Ben. They haven't lost since the 3rd of November.
Yeah,
they have
crazy.
Conceded 9 goals this season in the league. And, this is what Nigel might call like unstoppable force meets immovable object, because Burnley have only conceded 9 goals, and Preston have conceded 41 goals. So Burnley have scored 43 goals, and Preston have conceded 41 goals. So I would say that this one is going to have a 0 on one side of the score sheet. And I think if Burnley can manage to get one in, they'll probably get past them.
Yeah, I mean, I think their attack will be too good for Preston. They've had a thing where they've like about 9. It was something ridiculous, like 7 of the last 9 home games were 0-0s, and someone was like, could you imagine being a season ticket holder for Burnley, having to go watch all those games and like not one single goal?
Preston and Burnley have played twice.
Number, but it was like 0-0.
They've played twice in the league. They played twice in the league, and both have been 0-0 draws. So
wow.
I think that one might be one that ends up going to penalties. You know what I mean? Because we're past replays at this point, right?
Yeah.
Or are there still replays?
They've got Burnley recently brought in Marcus Edwards from Sporting, and he's looked like ridiculous. So yeah, I think they'll be fine in this game. But it is interesting if they go far in the FA Cup, because so if you're a half decent championship team, interesting. Just the last one I wanted to shout out was Darko JB, who's actually related to Darko that we know, friend of the show. He plays for Plymouth. He's on loan from Leeds, and he actually Leeds got him from Man City's academy. Man City got him from Millwall, and then he went from Man City to Leeds when they signed Calvin Phillips. It was part of the deal. What a great signing that was in the last game against Liverpool, and he's now going to face his old team. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. But yeah, let's see. I hope there's some surprises. Like I would love to see. It's not necessarily a surprise, but Fulham have lost to Man United twice this season. Don't know how, but they're now playing them in the cup. It's a nice chance for some revenge.
Yeah, and it's nice. I love it in these competitions when the lower division teams play each other, because then you get one of them have to go through, right? So obviously there will be one championship team in the next round, but it'll be interesting to see if we get any upsets as the championship teams or the lower league teams play and move on. That rounds up our FA Cup 5th round. And then next week, midweek, Ben, we have the proper round of 16 for the Champions League. As discussed, we have Bruges, Aston Villa, Dortmund, Lille, PSV hosting Arsenal, Madrid derby. It's a big one. Feyenoord, Inter, Benfica hosting Barcelona, Bayern playing Leverkusen in an all-German affair, and then PSG hosting Liverpool. You know, I think the one for me that sticks out, and I'm a narrative guy, right? But when Kylian was like, I hope that we get Atletico in the next round, so we don't have to travel. And I'm like, Kylian, I really hope for your sake that this does not turn into a meme. And you know that there is one football terrorist, Ben. There's one football terrorist that lives in Madrid. And what's his name? Diego Simeone.
The football terrorist.
I mean, this is football heritage. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine the scenes? Like, okay, score line prediction for Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid first leg. I have it 0-0. This has dreadful, like the most dire football you've ever seen, where like the players are like kicking. Mbappe is like 3 feet out from the goal, a 1 meter for our continental friends, and he kicks it over the bar. Like, I'm talking about all-time howler level of ridiculous ball. Like somebody's foot slips and you know what I mean? Like, this just has terrible match written all over it, in my humble opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I think at least one of them will be. It's interesting because of that. There's not away goals, so it's everything to play for in the second game. So you're probably right. I think the first game is probably out of the two, but like is more likely to be the dull one. And then the second game they go all out. But I don't know. It's just because Madrid are at home as well. Real Madrid are at home.
I mean, the fact that they have to go away in the second one is way worse too, because that's one of the toughest places to play. You know what I mean?
You know what? Yeah. Sorry. Go on.
Go.
No. I was just gonna say I saw something. I think it was yesterday that said they've not beaten Madrid since 2022, or was it 2022? They've not beaten Atletico. Real Madrid haven't beaten Atletico since then. I'm like, that would be that adds to it, because if they don't beat them in the first leg, they're going to be like, hey, this is ours now. You know,
there will be 10 men lined up in front of the goal. Well, let me rephrase that. There will be 8 men lined up in front of the goal, holding 2 men above their head backwards, right? This is the diabolical level of bust that we are going to see in that matchup. God forbid they go into the second leg with a lead. It's, I mean, these are honestly, like, as people will talk about, like, Jogo Bonita and like all of the beautiful game and all of that stuff. Nah, I am here for the terrorism. Like, I am going to watch all 180 minutes of that plus whatever stoppage time and extra time, and I'm going to be eating my popcorn because listen, it's a skill. Like, it's not like people are like, "Oh, anybody can do it." If everybody could do it, then they would do it. And they can't do it. Like, there's a reason why Sean Dyche is employed uh, often as a manager to keep teams from scoring against him, right? Like, there is a method, there is skill, there is technique, there is like a lot, like the amount of focus that you have to play that way for 90 plus minutes is insane, and so like I would, there was nothing more than I would like to see, obviously, with Real Madrid going out, because it would, assuming that my team can make it through, would make our route just a little bit easier. But I mean, that one is going to be, I think, a
I don't
matchup
know
for the
though.
ages. I mean, maybe it would and maybe it wouldn't, right? But maybe that's the last
Yeah,
thing we need, is a
this
team
is the
that's
thing. I
willing to
think
sit
these are
and
going to be
counter us.
hard, just in different reasons.
Yeah,
Yeah, they'll
for
both
sure.
be hard for different reasons.
But I think let's look at some, what we might call a hipster pick on this show, Ben. Let's give us your hipster pick for the match that you're most looking forward to out of this set of the first legs.
Mm, not necessarily hipster pick, but just because, well, one of them they've already played each other, and the other, um, I'm not sure if they have. Well, Benfica Barcelona, because that was the one of the most insane games previously. Yeah, I think it was 4-3 or was it 5-4? When Rafinha scored right at the end, and it was just constantly like they were 3-0 down at one point, I think, so 3-1 down. Pavlidis got a hat trick in the first half, and then it ended up Barcelona getting the win right at the end. And then for me, the PSG Liverpool game is just, that's going to be entertaining. The thing is, though, if Liverpool play how they did against City, which I think they might need to, especially on this leg, I think that's how they beat PSG. First leg, just get a 1-2-0 win, sitting back, defending a solid low to mid block, and leave guys like Salah to score the minimal chances that they get. And then second leg at Anfield is like perfect for them. They can just go all out and just absolutely batter PSG. The thing is, I think PSG they're not very good defensively, but they don't get tested a lot, and they're not very physical as well. So, I mean, you saw it when we played them in the group part. I never really felt playing as well as them now. They're a different team now. It's not just back then it was only Barcola who was a real threat. Now it's Dembele as well, Kvaratskhelia, Doué's really settled in as well. They've just got so many options. So they're always going to be a tough team to play, but yeah, it could be a real entertaining one. I hope neither team sits back and they both go for it, because it could be really entertaining. Same with Benfica, Barcelona as well. So it'd be one of them two for me in terms of which would be the most entertaining. Bruges, if it's like their last one, like that was really good. And if you saw that Atalanta game, it was crazy. Like every time they're going
Yeah, it
forward, and
was
then it was
mad.
perfect. It was literally perfect. Their plan, and it worked so well. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at them, obviously there's the big ones. Note for the Bayern Leverkusen match. Bayern have only won 1 of 8 against Leverkusen since 2022. There's a handful of draws in that run, but I think that one is going to be a tougher fixture than it might look. Obviously, Bayern have looked quite good over the last couple. They're obviously significantly ahead in the league. I think that one is mostly a formality as well. So Leverkusen will have everything to play for. Uh, I don't know if you saw the last Bayern match, but I mean, they Celtic just didn't decided not to mark Harry Kane like on the back post. Just didn't decide not to mark him. Uh,
Not the
which I
best.
don't think is a sustainable strategy, right? But it'll be interesting to see. I don't think like Bayern have had some decent results, but I don't think they're quite like the really free flowing team that they have been in the past. You know, they've taken their chances and they've made the most of it, but they that first leg against Celtic, and even in the they didn't have a ton of chances. They put away the ones that they have had. So I think that one's going to be closer than anybody's on either of those teams has really bargained for. But obviously, you get into this level of the UEFA Champions League, and all the teams are really good. That's how it works. Um, any last notes before we wrap up for the day, Ben?
Oh. No, I don't think so. Yeah, that's all for me.
All right, should be a fun weekend of FA Cup action. There's a lot going on in the world of sports all around. Uh, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on X at We All Follow Pod. Give your friends the gift that they need. Send this podcast to them. And we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for joining.